I think there may have been a little bit of pressure to name it just because we were sitting and talking once, and he was like, "So what are we?" And I was like, I don't know how to answer that." But I also come from a place where close friendships to me are they're romances. A romance doesn't necessarily mean that you're seeing each other naked and doing things to each other. A romance is a bond, an attraction, a spark, like that kind of thing. And again, like in culture, particularly with guys, culture puts a B at the beginning of romance to make it not gay. But a bromance is a romance. Friendship, close friendship is a romance. There's courting. There's all this other stuff that, the only difference is that you're not sleeping together.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 361. We're Finn and Emma, and today we talk with Mike. Mike is based out of Brooklyn. He is solo poly and queer and has been exploring non-monogamy for several years. Today he talks us through his amazing journey.
Yeah, absolutely love this conversation. And quick note about this, Mike, right up front here, Mike has a podcast called Detoxicity. It is an incredible conversation about a lot of things, but mostly are focused around masculinity. And I actually was recently on Mike's show. I actually recently recorded with Mike. The episode hasn't quite come out yet, but I'm just throwing that up here because Mike talks about it. So keep your ears open on his channel in the next couple weeks. I'll be over there.
It's coming soon.
Coming soon to a earbud near you.
Yes.
Yeah. And also really quick about Mike. Mike, if you'll head over to his website, you'll also see that he does some coaching and educating around relationships.
Mental health, sexuality.
Mental health, all the stuff. And yeah, we have such an incredible conversation today with Mike about, yes, it's about his non-monogamy journey, but it's also so much about his coming out, his finding who he is, and a really incredible conversation about mental health and therapy and the importance of taking care of ourselves and how fucking hard it can be to do that. So absolutely love this conversation. Absolutely love talking to Mike every chance we get. And luckily we get lots of chances because Mike's part of our virtual community. So
we'll talk about that in a minute.
We got Mike on tap, basically. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just raving about it. And maybe rather than me continuing to rave, we just jump into the conversation with Mike for anybody who's a premium subscriber. And for the rest of you, you get a few more minutes with just Emma and me.
In our announcements.
Let's do it.
If you're not familiar with the premium subscription, it's a way to skip these announcements up front. But don't worry, you still get important dates that we announce in the outro. To sign up for the premium subscription, it is only $4 a month. Go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Scroll down on the homepage. Links are right there.
And the most important date that you're going to want to take note of, really the most important date in your foreseeable future, is October 25th. That's our next virtual speed friending event. We had one of these just a few weeks ago with almost 50 people joining from all over the world. It was such a great time and we'd love to have you join us. We've been doing these for
since 2020,
almost 5 years now, coming up on 5 years. And we've been having a great time with them. The way they work is we put you into a Zoom breakout room with a handful of other people, 4 or 5 people. We ask a thought-provoking question that gives you something to talk about, get to know each other. We scramble the rooms, ask a new question, and we do that over and over for about 2 hours. And by the end of it, you leave just satisfied. I'm just going to say it.
And with like a really fun evening.
A fun evening and a whole bunch of new friends. So if this sounds like something you're looking for, if you're looking to have more social interactions, more friends, this is the place to start. We'd love to have you join us. You can find out more on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the events tab and you can find out there. There's also a giant banner right at the top that you absolutely can't miss. Check it out.
And just to be clear, these virtual speed friending events are open to anyone. You just must be open-minded and
awesome.
Respectful.
And awesome.
That's the word.
Respectful too, but awesome.
Yes, and awesome, and awesome. And we do these on a monthly basis too. So if you miss October's, there'll be another one in November. But we would love come join us in October.
Come join us in October. But if you don't want to wait all the way until October 25th, we've got a solution for you.
I was going to say there's other options to hang out with amazing people, and that is go over to the community tab on our website, check out our virtual community. It is only $5 a month to join, and you get access to our virtual platform where we're in there cheering each other on, having fun every single day with over 300 people. It's an incredible time. So come check it out.
I would actually say like this conversation today is sort of like the podcast version of what it's like to be in our community.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, because Mike is part of our community.
Totally. And these are the types of conversations we have, and we love it. So please check it out. Emma already told you how to find it. You're already over on our website signing up for the virtual meet and greet. And maybe the other thing you can do while you're over on our website is head over to that resources tab. There's tons of information there about different services that Emma and I have used throughout our journey in non-monogamy that we believe in, otherwise we would not tell you about them. But at the top of the list, our favorite one is stdcheck.com. As you know from listening to this show for so long, Emma and I are huge, huge fans of sexual health and sexual health advocacy, and we would love for you to join us. And the way that we do that is we use a service called stdcheck.com to get tested for STIs. It's super fast. It's easy. It is really affordable at only $129 when you use the links on our resources page. That saves you $10. It also helps support the show financially so we can keep doing this for free every week for you, and we don't want to stop doing that. So thank you to everybody who uses those links and supports us.
And thank you to anyone who is part of the community, who comes on the podcast, who comes to the virtual meet and greets as well, and then part of the premium subscription. All of that helps support the podcast. So thank you again. And a final reminder, reach out to us, send us a voicemail, send us an email over on the Contact Us page of our website. We would love to hear from you. And with that, we're ready to go and talk with Mike.
Let's do it. Welcome to the show, Mike. We're super excited to have you here. I mean, we've been orbiting. We've been swimming in orbit together. How about
yes.
for many years?
Well, let's go with that.
We've been swimming in orbit for a long time, and we're finally able to sit down and chat and have you on the show. I know I came on your show not that long ago, and so we're excited to be here talking today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show and talking to y'all as well.
Yeah.
We'd love for you to just start by introducing yourself at whatever levels you're comfortable with.
Sure. My name is Mike Joseph. I am born and raised and based in Brooklyn, New York. I am the host and producer of a podcast called Detoxicity, which aims to reframe the conversation around masculinity and push it into a more positive, progressive direction. I am also a life coach, focusing specifically on relationships. And I am a former member of the Life on the Swing Set podcast. I've done a whole bunch of other stuff in the interim. But that's my intro.
Awesome.
So you've been around a while.
Yeah.
For a bit of time. A little bit.
Amazing. Well, we're excited to dig into who Mike is and a little bit of your relational story today. And so maybe let's start with where you're at today. What do relationships and all of that look like for you as it stands here, beginning of August 2024?
What do relationships look like for me? As of right now, I am single with an asterisk. I am in a relationship, which is something that is kind of new for me. It is a platonic romantic partnership. It is long distance, reasonably long distance. Sometimes I'm like, this is long distance, but I'm like, but he's not in California or Washington. He's in Rhode Island. Like that's not very far, but it's far enough that I don't see him every day or every week or every month even. So it's a long distance relationship. Other than that, I am fairly commitment free. I identify as solo poly, but I'm out there looking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about just before we go back in time, I'm curious about the single with an asterisk, and the asterisk being a long distance romantic platonic partnership. And how does being single and being in a partnership coexist for you?
I mean, I guess the asterisk is loaded, right? Because if in terms of my day to day, my partner does, we communicate, I would say 4 to 5 times a week, even if it's like a brief message over Discord or something like that. But we're not directly in each other's lives on a super regular basis.
Mhm.
So it's, and we're still trying to kind of work out details as to what the nature of our relationship is, because it feels like more than a friendship.
Yep.
I think it is more than a friendship. We love each other very, very deeply. But it's not I mean, what's typical, what's standard, right? It is definitely unconventional, or to name it is unconventional.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of people would be like, well, it's a bromance, essentially. But we're putting a different name on it because bromance is corny. But when I meet people, I don't tell them that I don't. The verbiage that I use is not that I'm single. It is that I'm in a long distance partnership. And if they want more details, they can. I'm certainly happy to give that up. But
Yeah.
it's an interesting space that this occupies, and I don't think I've quite figured out where that lands yet.
Yeah. Is that a fairly new partnership?
It's grown progressively over, I would say, the last 2 years. We met 2 years ago, and for the first year, we friended each other on Facebook. We sort of established a baseline level of communication, and then we met again in person probably around this exact time last year, and the relationship became intimate. And obviously, when I say intimate, most people will think that it, became sexual, and it did not. But it became a lot closer. It became a lot, there's physical touch involved in all that stuff. And we realized that we had a connection. And because this is a long distance relationship, and also this person has another partner and children, uh, I have to be really intentional. We both have to be really intentional, but I think I'm happy with the onus is falling on me. Be more intentional about us seeing each other and making time to see one another. So I've been traveling up every 2 or 3 months to spend time with him, and things I feel like have grown progressively over the year that we've been connecting more regularly. So yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that does. Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think, you said in there, it was interesting. You said sort of naming it feels unconventional. And I think also like not naming it and labeling it as unconventional. And I think what's interesting about the space that we often swim in here is that pretty much everything we do feels a little unconventional. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, we could call it something and that would feel off, or we could just say, we're not going to call it anything, but people don't like that either. And it just sort of seems like sometimes you can't really win when it comes to putting a label on something or putting it in a box. Sometimes these things sort of exist in the in between, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that is where it exists. I think there may have been a little bit of pressure to name it just because we were sitting and talking once, and he was like, "So what are we?" And I was like, "Huh, I don't know how to answer that." But I also come from a place where close friendships to me are they're romances. A romance doesn't necessarily mean that you're seeing each other naked and doing things to each other. A romance is a bond, an attraction, a spark, like that kind of thing. And again, like in culture, particularly with guys, culture puts a B at the beginning of romance to make it not gay.
Yep.
Mhm.
But a bromance is a romance. Friendship, close friendship is a romance. There's courting. There's all this other stuff that, the only difference is that you're not sleeping together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point. I mean, just thinking about some of like my friendships and like my close friends, right? And like, like my best friend, right? There was a spell there where we would send each other like TikToks or videos like multiple times a day. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty deep. Like we weren't, it wasn't like passive in any way, right? But yeah,
Right.
like you said, we have to skirt around it or label it differently. So like you said, so it doesn't get labeled as gay or something that gets looked down upon for a whole host of other shitty reasons. Right?
Exactly.
Right. Well, I'm curious, Mike, going back in time, did you always sort of have this view and approach to relationships?
The short answer is no. For me, it started with recognizing my queerness, which happened at a pretty early age. But I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in a, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? In a not very permissive social environment. And, I struggled with my sexuality for a long time. So that was sort of the basis of maybe thinking a little bit more critically and sort of being like, this socialized behavior that I'm learning doesn't really jive with the way I feel inside. And as I got older and started to date people and enter in relationships with people, I was always waiting for that thing to hit me where it was like, you see it in movies and everything where like they meet somebody and they're like, oh, I don't want anybody else for the rest of my life. And it wasn't even like a sexual appetite thing. It was I like this person. I enjoy dating this person. I don't want to not date this person, but I feel like I have room to have relationships with other people. It doesn't feel like, the Cupid didn't shoot the arrow in and like make me blind to the attractiveness, physical and mental attractiveness of other people forever. So I was conflicted about that for a really long period of time because I was not exposed to successful open relationships. So went into my 30s just kind of feeling like something doesn't feel right, but I can't really articulate it.
Well, and it sounds like throughout that time, I mean, that time was very formative of like figuring out your sexuality and the relationship style all together it's a lot.
Yeah,
it
really is.
Yeah.
It really, really, really is. And what ultimately ended up kind of solidifying things for me is I'd say this was maybe 2010 or so, 2010, 2011, maybe even a little bit later. I was on OkCupid. I met a couple and we went to play trivia. They lived in my neighborhood. We went to play trivia. And I was like, wow, I really like these people. And not only do I like these people, but they are in a committed relationship with one another. They have no shame about both being queer, being open, any of that stuff. And I was like, it wasn't even so much an attraction thing as it was this is normalizing this thing for me. And I remember my brain tells me it was the next day, but I'm not so sure it was the next day. It might have been a week later or something like that. I was in a therapy session and I explained the situation to my therapist and he was like, I need you to do me a favor. Next time you go to a bookstore or you're on Amazon or whatever, there is this book that you need to read called The Ethical Slut. And I'd never heard of the book before. And he was like, I think what you're explaining to me sounds like polyamory. He was like, do you know what that is? And in my brain, I conflated polyamory with swinging. So I had this image of like 70s wife swapping people and like, you know, muumuus and silk robes, kind of like trading partners and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm not really familiar with that concept, or at least it doesn't, the way you're explaining it to me doesn't mesh with the vision that I have in my head. He was like, get the book. And I was living in Boston at the time, and there was a bookstore maybe a 5-minute walk from my therapist's office. I went to the bookstore, immediately picked up the book and started reading it on the subway ride home. And it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, this is me. So I started looking for community in Boston, which, funnily enough, my New England poly community is much bigger now that I live in New York than it was when I actually lived in New England. And then somewhere in that timeline, I moved to New York. And one of the first things I did when I moved back here was go online and look for groups where polyamorous people meet up. And there's an event called Poly Cocktails that happens here in New York City. It's fairly popular. And I went and there were like 150 people there. And I was like, oh, shit. This, one of the beautiful things about the internet, one of the beautiful things about social media is that those of us who felt like we were the only freak, we were the only like weirdo, the only person that thought the way we thought, can very easily find hundreds of other people who think the same way that we do or have the same feelings that we do. And walking into this room with all of these people who were, I mean, obviously not exactly looking for the same things that I was looking for, but realizing that there was this large community there was just like, oh, these are my people. What have I been, you know, fussing around with all this time for? Like, okay, this is where I belong. And it kind of went from there.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just even thinking back to like your date on OkCupid. I feel like even at that point, that's a pretty, I mean, to go out with a couple, right? Not many people we talk to outside of the non-monogamy sphere are like, oh yeah, I'm on OkCupid and I went on a date with a couple. Like that's pretty far out there for a lot of people. And I'm curious for you, that first time doing it, what was that like?
I don't know that I felt like it was a date. It felt like, okay, I'm meeting some cool people and we're going to hang out. And I don't know, very remote possibility that something beyond that would happen. The truth of the matter is that they did actually proposition me that first night, and I said no. Because I was like, I like these people, and I don't want to immediately jump into this and mess it up.
Yeah.
And the lovely part of all that is that however many years later, 12, 13 years later, we're still friends. None of us lives in Boston anymore. I performed their wedding ceremony, so I married them.
Oh, cool.
They now have 2 beautiful children, and it turned into this fantastic friendship, and we never slept together.
Yeah.
So it was just a very interesting, completely unplanned series of events that kind of put me in that space. But initially, I like maybe a little piece of me looked at it as like a date, but I think the bigger part of me looked at it as like I can meet some new people and some interesting people and get some new perspectives and make some new friends.
Yeah. And have fun at trivia.
Yes. And I think we won. So yeah,
awesome.
It turned out to be, yes, quite fun.
Well, I think it's amazing, right? That the thing it sounds like you really walked away from that experience with was, yeah, these people are amazing, but it felt okay to be myself. Like it was okay to be a queer man growing, like figuring it out. Like that was okay. You didn't have to hide parts of you because they weren't hiding parts of them. And that became sort of the gateway to, oh, there's more than just these 2 people. Like there's whole events where I can go and be me.
Yeah. So much of being queer, being poly is, I thought was really sort of shrouded in shame and secrecy. A lot of S words there.
Yeah.
So, I spent the first 2/3 of my life really living this sort of double, triple life, being secretive, not being able to articulate the things that I felt. And thankfully, I was able to meet people who normalized all this stuff for me. And it was huge. And those experiences have allowed me to become way more confident, way more open in like an honesty way. And, hopefully kind of modeling that behavior for other people who are on the fence about their queerness, their, relationship orientation, whatever it is.
Yeah. And so how long after you read The Ethical Slut, I have it in my brain that you read the whole book on the way home. By the time
I didn't read the whole book on the way home. It wasn't that long a ride, even though I'm a fast reader. It took a couple days.
That's not a super short book either.
Yeah.
So you read The Ethical Slut. How long after that is it that you end up at Poly Cocktails? And then where does Poly Cocktails sort of take you on this adventure?
I was still living in Boston when the Ethical Slut stuff happened. So that must have been, I want to say 2012 or 2013. And my first Poly Cocktails experience happened at the end of 2015. So it's probably like a two or so year period in between. Once I went to that event and then started finding other events in New York to go to regularly, the first thing for me was building community. And I just made friends. And, 9 years later, I'm friends with a lot of those people still, through various stages of life. Some of those folks have kids now. It really initially and still, was about building community, having a bunch of people that I felt safe around, where, we were in each other's lives. We enjoyed each other's company, for a long period of time up until spring 2020. And then occasionally after, I would have monthly game nights at my apartment and would invite all of my, not just my poly friends, my work friends, my, friends from my, journalism days, like all that stuff. I would just invite a bunch of friends over and have it be like a mixer. And, what the initial poly cocktails experience proved to me was just like the importance of community. It exposed me to a lot of thoughts and ideas in combination with therapy that I never really got to think about before. The idea of, sexual orientation and romantic orientation potentially being different, all of those things being on a scale or a spectrum. It taught me, that experience was sort of the linchpin to teach me a lot of things about gender. So it really kicked off this huge learning experience for me that's in a lot of ways led me to where I am now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, it took several years to kind of go on that journey, which makes a lot of sense. You're unpacking a lot of things. But kind of as you started creating community and establishing that community, and at some point moved from Boston back to New York. And I guess, how did that, in those, between 2015 and like COVID 2020 timeframe, like, were most of your experience on like just trying to dive in and establish community and make friends and just learn as much as you can?
I would say the primary objective was community and meeting people and building chosen family in a lot of ways. Dating was a secondary objective.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure how successful I was in that realm. I had some sort of short-term relationships, nothing that's really stuck. This is sort of a joke in my friend group. I tend to attract straight guys. I am baby's first male experience, basically, and that leads to some difficulty there. And I don't think I even like recognized at first that was this space that I was slotting myself in. So that at the outset led to a lot of awkward interactions. But at the end of the day, the primary motive is, and always will be community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the things that we tell people all the time. I would say, especially when we're talking to men who are out there going, why can't I meet anybody? My partner's meeting people. Why can't I meet anybody? It's so hard for guys, you can't meet anybody. And the thing that we often tell people is go to events, build community, make friends, change your focus from, I want to find somebody to partner up with or hook up with, or any of the sort of quote unquote next level. Make yourself an amazing group of friends and make yourself a community that you are well known in, you're vetted in, you are a safe space, you are in a safe space. There's so many things that can come out of that. And it sounds like you really not just put it there initially, but like kept it as the foundational building block for how you've explored relationships or partnerships or connection moving forward. I don't know. I just think that's really powerful way to go about doing it. And maybe even like you said, like, I don't know how successful the dating part was, but it sounds like there's maybe a little less need or desperation if you have like a
Mm-hmm.
big, beautiful, chosen family that you've built around yourself.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else. I would say that's definitely the case for myself. Look, having a partner in close proximity would be nice.
Sure.
But it's not my primary motive. Like, there's a little hippie inside of me that's like screaming and really, tries to impress upon myself and impress onto other people that community is just super important for the survival of us as a species. Like, we need each other. And, maybe that's coming from a space of, me having dealt with some mental health challenges over the course of my life. Like, I want people, and those people don't have to be people that I'm making out with or fucking or whatever it is. I want people who are, around as like a loving community, as a supportive community. Like, the love and the support is way more important to me than anything physical.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also curious about the experience you touched on there about you said you tend to attract straight men. And I'm curious, as somebody who went through your own sort of journey of I'm guessing coming out, discovering your sexuality, accepting it, all of the things that go into that. I mean, first of all, if you're open to sharing a little bit about what that journey was like for you, and then what that's like when you find yourself in a situation with somebody who maybe you're like, oh boy, that was me 10 years ago, or some version of, I see myself in this. And this is also like, I imagine can be frustrating to keep coming into these situations where you're like, not that it's a bad place to be, but also that's maybe a hard place to be, always being like somebody's first experience figuring themselves out.
Well, it takes more energy.
It's a different level of support.
A different level of support.
And patience, and it's a different type of relationship.
Absolutely. So to answer your first question, the coming out process for me, or the acceptance stage for me, took a fairly long amount of time. I mean, I grew up in the age of AIDS. I grew up at a time when there were very few openly queer men represented in media. Certainly very few, if any, openly queer Black men represented in media. I can't even think of any off the top of my head. So there's that. I'm the first American-born member of my family. My folks both my parents are immigrants. The way that they thought, and in some cases still think, about male queerness is very Ice Age, very, it's sometimes people are like, so has your family accepted you? And I'm like, I think the younger members of my family are fairly cool. Like, they're American. They've grown up around queer people. They're younger, like that whole thing. I think the older members of my family still think that something somewhere made me gay.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, Mike is who he is, but we don't approve. So, kind of with all of that as the backdrop, I started to really question my sexuality around, I'd say 16, 17, 18, and started inching out of the closet after I graduated high school. And I would say for another 10 to 15 years after that, I was situationally in and out of the closet. I had friends who knew that I was queer. I didn't come out to anybody in my family until I was probably 36. There were times when I would completely, I also grew up in a somewhat religious household. So for a long time, the idea that my sexual and romantic orientation was a sin was very much in my head. I can remember, and this isn't incredibly long ago, this is maybe 15 years ago, having an experience with someone who was in seminary school. And we had a physical experience. And then he started talking about, religion and all that stuff. And actually, I started looking up conversion therapy at that point. So, I'm not that far removed from it. But I think what ultimately brought me fully out was, I think, social media to a large extent. And, MySpace, then Facebook, and really sort of being at a point where I could post something and not have to actually go to every single person and tell them about it. And it would just be out there in the world, and people could draw their own conclusions, or, read it if they want to, not read it if they don't want to. And, I still think, I know that there is still a huge stigma against male bisexuality, against male queerness, particularly for guys that don't subscribe to a particular stereotype. Even within the queer community, there's bias against, guys who are bi or pansexual. There's bias towards guys who are, again, not sort of queer in the stereotypical sense. And that, I think, causes a lot of confusion, social stigma within the community, self-hatred, socialized stigma, all of this stuff. And for guys who are maybe looking to explore or are contending with having romantic feelings towards another guy, there's a whole bunch of calculus you have to do in your head to determine whether you even want to go through with it in the first place. So I understand why some people have the experience and kind of freak out. But also, I understand, and I don't say this to be like, I take it however it gets taken. I think that I'm a safe space for a lot of these guys to explore because, for better or for worse, I don't give off any obvious signs. I can relate to them on a level where they feel comfortable. And, I also think I'm a pretty trustworthy guy. So I think that those experiences, those things put together almost kind of make me a target for
Mhm.
people who are exploring or unsure about their sexuality. And I do, somewhat separate from that, think that there really is this inflection point. A lot of guys, I would say, plus or minus 10 years of my age, I'm 48. So guys from like mid to late 30s to I'd say 60 or so are having that came up in the age of AIDS and rampant homophobia. And all these years later are reading all of this stuff and learning all this stuff. And they're like, I maybe had been thinking about exploring this for a while now, and it seems kind of normalized. What am I? Who am I? Have I missed out? What can I do? Like all of this stuff. I would say this year I've had at least a dozen conversations with guys, a lot of whom are friends, about this exact same thing. So it really seems like, Gen X folks, Gen X guys who grew up with all of this like internalized homophobia hit midlife and they're like, oh shit, there's this unresolved thing that maybe I kind of want to resolve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd also imagine like some people see kind of, if they get to know you a little bit, see some of themselves in your story. And I can see how that's like relatable and creates that trust and dynamic as well.
Sure, absolutely. I look, I'm very appreciative of and grateful for young people, a lot of whom are able to just come out now. Whenever someone tells me they came out in high school or junior high school, I'm like, holy crap. Like that was never even an option for me. I graduated from high school in 1993 in a class of 1,200 kids, and there was one openly queer guy. This is in New York City.
Yeah.
So just, consider that. But, a lot of folks in my age range just did not have the opportunity or the knowledge or the verbiage to express themselves even internally the way that they would have liked to, the way that they didn't have the emotional intelligence that young people have now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so buried in shame.
Yes. Yeah.
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 I mean, I want to acknowledge too, Mike, like you've swimming against the current in so many aspects of this. And like you said, like to be a safe space for people, I think is when people feel that, I mean, similar to the feeling you guys at Poly Cocktails, right? Like, oh, it's a safe space. Okay. I can test this. I can test that. I can see what fits, what doesn't fit. And I think too what you said about the stereotypes that go along with this, right? That if I'm somebody in my, we'll say midlife-ish in my 30s, 40s, not that that's necessarily midlife, but you're thinking, okay, I want to explore this. If I might be gay or bisexual or queer, and you look that up, like you're going to get a whole lot of Google image results that may not look like you. And to say that, like, when I say may not look like you, that may not look like that person who's Googling it.
Sure.
That you don't have to look like any certain thing to be that thing. Like you don't have to look a certain way to be a certain way. And I think that breaks people's brains a lot of the time that like, oh, this person is who they are regardless of how they look.
Right. And, that's the thing. A lot of people hold these stereotypes, even though somewhere in their mind they might know that it is a stereotype and it's not representative of everybody. But, it's like, hey, I like sports. Drag isn't my thing. It's okay if it's yours. I am not super flamboyant. I don't dress particularly colorfully, you know, all of that stuff. And I do think that there are people, there's an element of people inside and outside of the queer community, the same way that, there's a lot of policing within the Black community, within any minority community of how you should look, act, and sound. And then that becomes the prevailing narrative of like, we're seeing this when people are like accusing Kamala Harris of not being Black enough. Like,
You're right, right.
Right.
Well, she just recently switched over, so that's probably part of it.
That's exactly what it is. But the reality is, queer means so many different things. Sexuality is a spectrum. Romantic interest is a spectrum. All this stuff is a spectrum. One thing I love, and this is not just because I have a crush, is that Nick Offerman often plays queer characters. Like he played a queer character on The Last of Us. He played someone who was dating both Will and Grace on Will and Grace. He played a queer character, Andre Braugher's husband on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or ex-husband. He's played a ton of queer characters over the course of his career. And if you look at him, he looks and sounds like the archetypical straight guy from the Midwest, like burly, gun shooting, wood table making. Like
he basically is his character on Parks and Rec.
He's Ron
in
Swanson.
real life. Yeah, he is Ron Swanson. Yes, exactly.
And then you see him like kissing a guy in a television show, and he's not affecting anything. He's not changing his voice. He's not changing his dress. He's not changing his mannerisms. He's just being who he is. That opens the door for a lot of people to be like, oh, if this guy looks and sounds like this and has these feelings, maybe it creates space for other people to kind of live their truth. And again, look, the stereotypes exist for a reason, first of all. And secondly, there's nothing wrong with the way anybody presents themselves.
Totally.
You can be as flamboyant, as femme, as whatever as you want, but you also have to make space for the opposite of that. It's all valid.
Yeah,
Totally.
It's all on a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think even within that, I can see where again, not that there's anything wrong with being very flamboyant, but I could see if you are in the early stages of like trying to figure this out and you're like, I want to go and have an experience or go to dinner, but I maybe still want to blend in, that you don't feel like, well, the only way I could go out on a date with another guy is if I get dressed up very flamboyantly to do it, that you can do it as yourself, that you can be you.
Yeah, and there are people out there that don't want to call attention to themselves.
Totally.
They may still be dealing with homophobic family members or friends or live in a small town where if, somebody drives by or walks by and sees you having dinner or whatever with this other person, they're going to make a snap judgment and an association there that you might not be ready to deal with yet.
Yeah.
So, I do think that as someone who can quote unquote go undercover, I can provide a bit of a safe space for some folks. And, some days I don't feel so great about that. Some days I do feel great about it. I mean, look, I psychological safety is a really big thing for me. I aim to be a safe space no matter what the situation is, but I also, I know psychology a little bit. I know people and, I'm not putting on airs. I'm not affecting anything. I am who I am. And I wish for everybody to be able to fully be who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I was going to say too, of like, you need to encourage to be who you are. And that is.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said too. And I appreciate the conversation and digging into this a bit, Mike, because I think the thing that sticks out to me too is it's not that you're hiding, right? You're not you're showing up as you, and this is how you look like, and this is how you do life. And that inherently creates a space that seems to attract a certain demographic of people, and not because you've done it for that reason or you're hiding, but just that's what sort of the way the cards fall. And so I don't know. I appreciate being able to dig into it and unpack it a little bit, because I think it's really important to be able to.
I agree.
To have the conversations. And I imagine there's enough people listening out there going, oh, that sounds kind of like me. Or maybe I'm having a second thought about this.
Yeah.
So,
it's a reminder, like, you don't judge people just on one thing.
Yeah.
There's so much more to humans.
Yeah. I mean, we are complicated beings. And I think about that in relation to the podcast I do, where I'm like, everybody has a story. Even if you present as the most boring person in the world, we just need to peel back one layer, and then a bunch of other layers are going to peel off too. Everybody's got a backstory. Everybody's interesting. You just have to put yourself in a space where you feel vulnerable enough to allow that interesting part of you to flow out.
Yeah.
And to be able to take it in when it's somebody else.
That too.
Yeah, somebody else's. Yeah. I'm curious too, you mentioned, coming out and like with your family at 36, but like, I guess coming out as a general concept, both from your sexuality and, but also in your relationship dynamic. And how has that journey been for you? It's a loaded question, but.
Yeah. You know what? Coming out as poly wasn't that bad because I had practice.
Yeah.
I already had to come out as something. So I think when I added a second thing, or even, I am very open about dealing with severe depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
So coming out as someone with mental illness and then coming out as poly, I think some of my friends were just like, okay, Mike, what else? Gee.
Yeah.
But I haven't received a lot of direct blowback from being polyamorous. I think a lot of people still don't understand it. So I think that's part of it. And some people have questions, and I'm happy to answer those questions if they're coming from a sincere, curious place.
Mm-hmm.
It's been an interesting journey. And it's not like I don't walk up to people and like shake their hand and be like, oh, blah, 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 I'm poly.
Yeah.
It usually comes up either later in conversation as we've gotten to know one another, or it comes up when someone looks at my social media, in which, I'm very open about being polyamorous. So it's been interesting. I still think some people that I'm friendly with don't really understand it. And look, there's still stuff I'm trying to understand too, but it's been, I would say, fairly neutral to good. I mean, I'm out at work as poly, which is a luxury that I know a lot of people cannot afford. And, part of that is also that, I don't have a local partner. I'm not married. So I'm not putting somebody else's business out there at the same time I'm putting my business out there. Like all of the blowback, positive or negative, is going to land on me. So I'm cool with taking that. That's fine.
Yeah. You can navigate it in the way you want to navigate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in all of that too, Mike. I appreciate you sharing that about sort of like you said, like you having practice at coming out and a few different things. And it sounds like you have learned a lot about yourself along the way around sexuality, polyamory, mental health, all of these different things. And I'm curious if there are a few things that through your experiences of exploring polyamory, non-monogamy over the last, 10 years or so, a little over 10 years or so, what have you learned about yourself? Have there been any big, like maybe surprises or aha moments that have kind of light bulbs clicked on for you?
There've been a few. I would say that being on this journey has allowed me to become more empathetic, a little bit more curious about people, interested in sort of like digging into what makes people tick. As far as myself, I think it's allowed me to dial into my confidence and my freedom a lot more. For a long time, I identified as a very like introverted, shy person, which people that know me now are like, Mike, no, absolutely not. And part of that I'm realizing is because I was hiding stuff. And whenever I was involved in a conversation with somebody, I had to practice what I was going to say before I said it, because I didn't want to say the wrong thing or say something that was going to presumably put me in a place of danger. The freedom that comes with not having to self-censor before you speak is amazing. And I think about it and I'm like, has my relationship with my relatives been damaged to an extent because of my outness? Probably. Have I lost out on some friends because of that? Probably. Have I lost out on some dates because of that? Definitely. Because I've had people tell me that I'm too out for them to date. So even taking all of that into consideration, would I trade it to be back in the closet about any of it? Hell no. I love being an open book. There is a weight that I had on me that is not on me because people know my business. And, people don't know all my business. I'm as open as I want to be, which is not completely open. I'm still very capable of keeping lots of things to myself or to a small group of people. But there's a freedom in being your full self that I wouldn't take back for anything in the world. And it's afforded me tons of opportunities. It's, I think back about all the good things that have happened in my life over the last 10 years, whether it's the people that I've met, the ability to do podcasts like this, the ability to meet great people through Life on the Swing Set, the ability to meet great people through the New York City poly scene, the radio show I had for 8 years, the podcast, all of that stuff. And none of that would have happened had I not decided to live my truth and talk about it to other people. So, it's a net positive. Nobody has, the lights aren't going to be green all the time. But if you have more green lights than red lights, you did good.
Mm-hmm.
So, and particularly as I'll be 50 in 2 years, as I approach that inflection point in my life and look at people who are my age or older than I am and are still kind of stuck in this analysis stage or this stage of fear. I not that it's a competition by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm like, all right, there's some stuff that I got over that other people are still getting over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you mentioned a little bit ago, being very open about dealing with severe depression and anxiety as well. And I'm just curious if you kind of feel similarly about being open about that. Has it impacted, provided more, I guess, opportunity and discussion and connection than not?
Absolutely. It's another thing. I mean, they're similar in some ways because mental wellness, mental health, mental illness is still very, very stigmatized.
Mm-hmm.
And, I come from a cultural background where like therapy was not something that was even put on the table as something that was an option. It was very much like, you're not crazy. You shouldn't go see a therapist. Oh, you shouldn't go telling your business to white people, all this other stuff. Therapy changed more than any single thing. Making the decision to go to therapy changed my life. And being able to say, hey, I'm a functioning person with a job in corporate America, and I do all these other things, and I suffer from depression, and I suffer from severe anxiety, and I have trauma issues. It models behavior for people. And one of my favorite things, and this has happened both in the mental health space and in the poly space, is that, and I worry about the egotistical way that this may sound, is that I've had friends come to me and be like, I started therapy because of you. I have had friends come to me and be like, I started exploring polyamory because of you. And I wish everybody would realize the power that they have to influence other people just by being themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We collectively have tremendous power to model behavior and to serve as examples for other people. It's like you push a door open a little bit and then 100 people trample over you because you opened the door. We have the opportunity, in what y'all are doing, what anybody who's affecting positive change is doing, to influence so many people and allow people to live in their truth and explore their best lives. And, it's, the first time a friend of mine said to me, she said something to the effect of, you gave me my life back, or you helped me get my life back, because she was in in an unfulfilling monogamous relationship. And it was as simple as me having a party at my apartment where I invited some of my poly friends because I don't segregate my friend groups. And she met some other poly folks, and she was like, oh, this is a thing. The same way, it happened for me when I went on that date, to bring it full circle. And now she is living her best life. And to think that I had even like a 0.1% percentage role in that is like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. It's awesome.
It's powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, right, there's the maybe the direct influence, right? That maybe somebody changes their, and I don't want to think that just for anybody listening, it's not like, hey, we're trying to convert people to polyamory.
Right, exactly.
But if that's a thing that you're like, I feel like that might be me, but there's no worldview of it, and then you get to see it. Like, that's really what we're talking about here. But I think there's that, but there's also the indirect of, holy shit, I know Mike, but I didn't know all of these things about Mike that are below the surface. I just saw him as this
super amazing, productive member of corporate America. And you're like, right. And, and depression and anxiety and polyamory and being queer and trauma. Those are all also part of that same iceberg that you don't get to see on the day to day. But when people see into it, it can help change their mind and be like, oh, I guess my son who's queer could also be successful in life, and I don't have to, cut them out or whatever stuff we're doing in our lives because of stereotypes and stigmas. When we know somebody, right, it changes it. When we really see somebody and we're like, oh, it's not what I thought it was. It can be very, very different. So I don't know. I just super powerful to be yourself.
Yeah. And ultimately that's how it worked for me. I didn't start going to therapy until a friend of mine was like, oh, Mike, I see a therapist. I didn't come out as queer until I was around other people who were openly queer, unashamed, and not in like a tragic sense.
Yeah.
I didn't come out as poly or even really understand that I could be poly until I met people who were modeling the behavior. So it's just so important to be that person who models this behavior, who, lives life fully and happily and successfully. And, just by existing, you have the power to serve as such a positive influence.
Yeah. Yeah. I also appreciate you saying that, like, getting into therapy wasn't something, I mean, I think it, in many ways, it's stigmatized for everybody, but I think it's extra on men of like,
Yes.
you shouldn't, like, you're a man, you should be able to figure your shit out, or you don't have emotions. Those are your two choices. And so I'm just curious, like, how long did you quote unquote fight it off before you're like, I guess I'm going to go to therapy? When did you make the jump?
So I started therapy at the very end of 2007. So I was 31 at that point. And all the things you just mentioned, societal stigma, cultural stigma. I mean, there were some financial barriers.
Yeah.
I had no idea who to even like call.
Where to start.
You don't know where to start because in 2007, the ease of availability was not the same as it is now in 2024.
It was a different landscape at that point.
Yeah. And, it hasn't been a straight line. There have been times when I've dropped out for a few months. There have been times when I've dropped out for a year. I've switched therapists on a regular basis. I've gone through different types of therapy, but I hit a breaking point, towards the end of 2007. I remember just spending a weekend in my room, in bed, being like, okay, if something doesn't happen, if I can't make some kind of change, I'm going to die. Like, it was as simple as that. So my friend Jason already, he was the first person to come out as being in therapy. First guy. Although I don't even know if I had any female friends at that point who had admitted that they were in therapy. So he might have just been the first person overall. But he gave me the number to his therapist and I made a call and, went in that first time not knowing what the hell to expect, and walked in and felt a level of comfort and a level of relief. And I was like, oh, this was cool. I'll come back a second time, and then just kind of rinsed and repeated.
I love it. No, I appreciate that story, as I fought it too. And I was 34, 35 when I made the jump too. And it was same, all of those stories, or just, I'm fine, I don't need it, and then, I don't know, now at this point, I'd go 5 days a week if I could.
Same. It's, and it's so interesting for guys because we do grow up with this socialization of be tough, men don't cry, you're not supposed to have emotions, all of this stuff that's ingrained in us, whether it's directly ingrained in us through our elders and our peers, or whether we get it through media. I grew up in the Rambo generation, and there are all of these strong, stoic, like muscly sort of like dudes who just like trampled over everybody. There were very few signs of vulnerability or emotions in men that weren't insulted, right? So, and that was a lot to get over and get past. I mean, I wish I'd have started therapy 20 years. I probably should have been in therapy 20 years before I was, but still to this day, I mean, you talk about suicide completion rates being higher for men. You talk about guys who, internalize all their issues and lash out violently towards their partners or strangers. You talk about everything from school shootings to, all this other stuff. And if you put any of those guys in a room with a therapist 10 or 15 years before whatever, event happens, like that changes the course of history. There's a lot that can be different. These people can live better lives. And it's just a matter of saying, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Sitting in an office, talking to somebody for 45 minutes about the shit that you go through and not keeping it inside so you don't punch a hole in the wall. That's good shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Even if it is hard and even if it does uncover more shit and more things, it's in there regardless. So it's, yeah.
Yeah. It's, it's funny. The first couple of times I walked out of a therapy session and was like, I feel worse. I was like, is this supposed to happen? And, at the end of the day, there will be times
Yes.
if you go to therapy when you walk out and you're like, oh my God, my life is a mess and I'm sad. But you're unpacking, right? It all leads to a greater good, and feel those emotions, explore those emotions, kind of like, take the time to think about that stuff. Why do you feel that way? What was said? What was expressed? What are you holding back? All of that stuff. Like anything that I was talking to somebody for an episode of my podcast recently, and I was like, I'm not pro therapy. I'm pro good therapy, and I'm pro self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being able to do the work to be self-aware.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm super grateful we got to talk today, Mike. And
Same.
yeah, I want to give you a chance to plug your work. One thing I did want to say really quick is just your last point there about your pro good therapy. And I think that is finding a good therapist can be really hard, right? There isn't like a world ranking and you can just go and pick like, well, they're in the top 10%. So there's a lot that can go into that and it can be very overwhelming. So I'll throw a couple of links in the resources or the podcast show notes for the episode for like Therapy Den is one of the places we love to send people because there's some really good, reviews and tools for filtering and finding stuff. So, and then if you have any as well, shoot them my way and we'll throw them in the show notes for people as well.
Sure. Like to that point, we're all different.
Yep.
You could have the most accredited, best therapist in the world, and your vibes might just be off.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've had friends in the past who went to see somebody and they were discouraged because that person was not a match.
Yep.
And my whole thing is therapy is like, finding a therapist is like dating.
Yep.
You're
Yes.
not going to fall in love and marry the first person that you go on a date with, unless you are very, very, very lucky.
Yep.
You have to audition people, and it may take 3 or 4 times. Like you have to figure out, you even have to figure out what you want as you're going through the process.
Yeah.
Sometimes even as you're going through, you gotta be like, okay, this person isn't for me, but you don't stop dating because you meet one person that you don't have that vibe that you want with. You keep trying people out and eventually you find your people. And it's the same thing with therapy and therapists. Eventually you will find your people.
Yeah. And I think people are often scared too once they start with one therapist to like, oh, I can't change. Like I have to be committed to this one therapist. And it's like,
Till death do us part.
yeah. And it's like, well, but if it's not feeling right, have that conversation with the therapist. Like, and they will encourage you to hopefully find somebody else. You're right. Like the fit is so important and we're all different people. And so 2 people may mesh really well together and they may not mesh. And so if you don't find one that feels good, find someone else and try again.
Yeah.
And if they're really good, if they're a really good therapist, they will help you find
exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Yeah. Yeah, we've played that game before. Yeah. And I think too, right, it's just to belabor this for just a minute more is you might have a friend recommend somebody, right? This happened to us for our last couples therapist. Friends were like, she's amazing, fantastic, saved our marriage, you'll love her. and we worked with her for about a little over a year, I think. And it wasn't that it was bad, but it was not a good fit for us, right? Whereas ultimately, right? Whereas it saved their marriage, we were like, we need to stop this because it is actually not helping us. It might even be making things worse at the moment. And so there was, just being able to acknowledge that and say, hey, this person may be the world's highest rated, but it may not be a good fit for me. So I need to find something.
Right. Well, and that therapist likely is a good fit for other people.
Without a doubt.
That's the thing.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
One size doesn't fit all.
Right.
Nope. Amazing. Well, I think this is a great segue into maybe sharing a little more about your work, your podcast, and what people can expect when they come and find you.
Great. So my podcast is called Detoxicity. We are, by the time this airs, we will be somewhere in either the 180s or 190s in episodes. I started the podcast at the beginning of 2020, and we've had some amazing guests. Finn, you have your show, as of the time we record this, is upcoming. It may be out by the time this is released.
Assuming I got you that photo that I bought.
Yes. But it's been a really wonderful exploration. And, I think calling it about masculinity is putting too fine a point on it. It really is just about people's stories and their journeys and the things that they go through. And I put it through a masculine lens because I'm a guy. And I do think that guys need to hear more guys being vulnerable and open. I've had comedians on, I've had musicians, I've had other podcast hosts, I've had therapists, I've had coaches, I've had, regular people, just a variety of people across the spectrum. And it brings me so much joy and makes me think so much. And then the conversations that I have are so valuable and impactful, and they always make me think. I tell people, I don't really do this podcast for other people. I do it for me, because every time I talk to somebody, I learn something new. So you can find that everywhere that you can find podcasts. I became a life coach last year, got my certification. If you're interested in that, you can find me at mike-joseph.com. There's other sort of random stuff that I do. Those are kind of the two big things. I'm on Instagram at DetoxPodGuy. By all means, feel free to give me a follow and say hi. And that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah,
awesome.
Amazing.
Awesome.
I love the admission that you don't do this for other people, that you do it for yourself. And we
have felt that way in the past.
We feel that way, but we try to pretend it's not the truth.
It's for everybody,
right? Including us. It can be for us too, right? We can also benefit. I think it is like, there's no doubt that doing the interviews that you do, and then going back and having to edit them and really think about them there's no way that we all don't really get a lot out of this. And
absolutely.
So I know what we get out of it. And so I kind of have an idea of how it impacts people. And so I know the same is true for your show as well.
Mm-hmm.
Every episode of my show is one less billable hour for my therapist.
That's right. You're gonna put all the therapists out of business. I'm also curious, Mike, on the life coaching side, what spurred you into that? And then what training did you go through?
What does it look like to work with
you? What pieces of life do you coach on?
So first question is what spurred me to do it was kind of what I spoke about earlier, about my existence being a place to model behavior where people could see things in me and maybe realize things about themselves or come to terms with things about themselves. Some of it was that I was already doing mental health work. I was speaking about my experiences with mental illness at colleges, for charities, at organizations, at work, all of this stuff. And even when I was younger, one of my ambitions, one of my dreams was to be a psychiatrist. I realized at some point that I wanted to figure out how to maybe get a little bit more of a foothold in that world for real. And the podcast was also a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my New Year's resolution for 2022 was that I was going to find a way to get myself a little further ingrained in the wellness world. So I went online and looked up life coaching certifications, spoke to a few friends who work in the mental health realm, and realized, A, You don't actually need to take a class to become a life coach. You can just say you're a life coach and be done with it. And that there were online courses that you could take and get a certification. I also spoke to, again, sort of like the modeling behavior and the kick in the butt thing. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is a psychiatrist, I think was actually my guest on the very first episode of my podcast, Mike Friedman. And he was like, you'd be a really good life coach. And if you decided to pursue that, I would support you. And I was like, okay. And it was one of those things where all I needed was like the kick in the ass. And so I took a course, an online course over the course of a few months, took my final exam on Labor Day, and got my certification soon after. And, there are various organizations that can accredit you. And ultimately, I think your best quality as any kind of mental health professional, regardless of what degree you have, what certification you have, is the ability to relate to people and the ability to empathize. And I don't big myself up all that much, but I do think my empathy button is pretty well formed. I've been dirt poor. I work in corporate America. As a Black person working in corporate America, I understand, Black people are indoctrinated in white America. So we understand we're multicultural in that sense. Queer people are multicultural in that sense, because a lot of times you have to sort of play straight for a while until you're comfortable with yourself. So there's just this element of me being able to see things from multiple perspectives. And I think that lends itself very well, in addition to just my general concern for people, to being a life coach. And as far as what I focus on, relationships are a big thing for me, whether they're familial relationships, friend relationships, partner relationships, work relationships. I have a lot of complicated and fraught experience in all of those things. And, the way that people interact with each other is endlessly fascinating for me. So I would say if I have one expertise, it's relationships. And I love working with, people who identify as queer and non-monogamous, although not exclusively. I think I have, relation points to just about everybody. But yeah, relationships for me is where it's at.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And like anyone who's listening can go find links to everything you mentioned in the show notes. And thank you so much for the conversation today. It was really lovely to talk with you. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Emma and Finn, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, totally. Is there anything else you want to get out there in the world before I let you go today, Mike?
I feel like I covered a whole bunch of stuff.
You did. You did.
So if anybody out there listening has any questions for me, I'm very easily reachable. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome.
Totally. I'm gonna make a shameless plug for ourselves. One way people can find you is in our community.
Yes.
Which your community is awesome, by the way. So many amazing people, including quite a few people that I already know.
Right?
Oh, cool.
That happens to be the case. People are like, I didn't know this person was in here. Yeah. Amazing. So I just wanted to say that these people that you're listening to us, that we have on the show often. So people like Mike, these are the types of people that are in our community all day, every day, hanging out, supporting one another, being goofy, making mistakes, learning from our mistakes, all the things. We do it together. So it's great to have you in the community, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for having me. Totally. I love that.
All right, I'm done shamelessly plugging ourselves.
I think we can just plug ourselves.
Okay, I'm working on the shame part.
There you go. It's a process.
I'm just a few more years of therapy, and I'll have it licked.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful summer evening in New York City, Mike.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're back.
Nailed it. I just wasn't quite on the same page.
I know. The story of our life.
We are
perpetually on different pages.
We are back. Thank you so much, Mike, for everything today. What an amazing conversation. And thank you for being a wonderful member of our community and just all of the incredible work that you put out there as well. A reminder to anyone listening, go over to the podcast show notes, either in your podcast player or over on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the podcast tab. You can find links for all of Mike's work. Go and check it out.
please do. And keep in mind that yours truly, Finn, will be over on Mike's podcast very soon in the next couple of weeks, having a fantastic conversation about masculinity and
Go listen.
my life and all the things. So we'd love to see you over there as well.
A quick reminder that our upcoming virtual speed friending event will be October 25th. Mark your calendars, go to our website, sign up, and we're excited to see you there.
You know what? If you sign up, you don't even have to mark your calendar because it puts it on your calendar for you.
Exactly. So you should do that right now.
That's my recommendation for best practices.
And next week, surprise, surprise, we have another interview for you. This one is with Eve, and it's going to be amazing. Eve is the co-author of More Than Two, and she talks about the revision that has come out this fall, More Than Two version.
Second edition.
That's what I was looking for. So we're super excited to bring you that conversation with Eve next week.
And we will see you all then. Until then, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your week and weekend ahead. And we'll see you in a week.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.